have that. All right, so what I'm going to do first of all is on bodies. So I'm going to go to start a new part. All right, so, and I'm just going to make a cube, my favorite little 5 by 5 cube, and go to features, extrude, and go to 5, right? So 5-inch cube there. Pretty simple. I look at my solids body here, and I have obviously one solid body. And so the next body I'm going to create is going to be on this top face. And I'm just going to create another extrusion with a simple circle. And that one's going to be 2.5. I'm going to extrude that. And that one I'll just extrude 2 inches. But this one I'm not going to merge, right? I'm not going to merge that. So I think everybody's familiar with not merging a result. And by not merging, it creates a second body. So I'll call that cylinder. We call this cube. All right, so here I have two solid bodies not merged, and I can look up here in my folder and it says 2. So by having the folder open, you can keep track of your bodies and kind of what's going on with your part. Because sometimes you may have wanted to everything be merged, but you may have inadvertently clicked the merge off, or maybe you wanted it merged or not merged and you clicked on merged, or you left that on. So by looking at the folders, you can see that there's two separate bodies, whether intended or not. Okay, so here you can simply, like, if you do want them to come back into just being one solid body, let's say you wanted to maybe shell the bottom of this and have it come up the top, or maybe you want to fillet this and have there be a fillet between the cylinder and the cube. Here we cannot fillet, right? We can't fillet at least between the cube and the cylinder because they don't share a common edge. Right now, the cylinder has its own edge, and its own edge is the round cylindrical wall with the flat face below that cylinder, right? So that's, if I hide the cube, oops, no, I wanted to hide it, not edit it, so hide. If I look underneath, there's the face of the cylinder. So that's what when you say fillet for that edge, that's what it's thinking it wants to fillet. But we don't want that. We want a fillet between the cube and the cylinder. I'll turn that on. And what would we have to do? We'd have to merge them. So I'm going to select both of these bodies. And there is no merge tool, but it's similar. It's called combine. So we combine the two bodies. So as long as they're sharing space, and in this case, they're sharing that, that face, some commonality between them. I'm going to click OK. It's now one combined body, and it's called combined because it didn't take the name of either cube or cylinder. It took the name, because it's a new body, it took the name of the last feature. Okay, so, but the important part is that now they share an edge. So this face ends right at the cylinder wall, and this cylinder wall ends at this face. So they share an edge, and you can think of it as a knit edge, and if you're thinking about it in kind of surfacing terms. But now I can right click this, I can hit the fillet, and now I can fillet between the cylinder edge and the cube face, right? So pretty standard. So it all came about because I combined both of these. So I'm going to delete this, and I'm going to delete this to combine. So I'm back to the two bodies. And this time what I'm going to do I'm going to use some of the direct editing tools. So if you go over to past sheet metal, and if it's not there, you can turn on direct editing as a tab here. So direct editing is, you know, I've been using it more and more in the last couple of years just because it's so useful. You know, it's sometimes, you know, when you're designing, you don't necessarily have everything, you know, designed from the very beginning, right? It's like usually a design is an evolving thing throughout the modeling process. So a sketch that you may have sketched, you know, very early on no longer applies to something that is way down the feature tree. And, you know, that's just the design process. You know, there's people asking for changes. There's necessary changes because of the material, maybe because of it has to fit into something else. And what direct editing does, it lets you edit things way down the feature tree without having to go all the way up, have to edit something way up here, and then get all those red X's down below. So that's what, because that's a big time suck, right? I mean, it just takes so much time to get rid of all those red X's because, you know, there's some relation that got lost or something, right? Some surface that's no longer there, and and something that's, so you said up to surface is no longer, that surface is no longer there. So what direct editing does, you'll get the faces, and it'll work with the faces and the bodies that you have currently, no matter where along in the process you are, and help you change and edit those. So, and I'll show you also the difference, because it's something that I came up with at the SolidWorks World. So at SolidWorks World, that was one of the presentations that I did up there on direct editing, and kind of the big difference too between direct editing and the instant 3D tool, because there is a difference between the two. If I select, let's just select, so I have the instant 3D on, right? Usually it's on by default. And if I were to click on, let's say, a face here, notice how I have a certain, you know, there's certain arrows here that show up. If I click up here, there's a little arrow that shows up. So what that is, that's a direct editing tool that if I were to click on this arrow and drag this down, what it's doing is it's editing the feature that created this face. In this case, what created this face was this boss extrude, right? I just did an extrude on this 5x5 sketch. I remember I extruded it 5 inches, and that's how I got my cube. And that's how this face appeared there. What this instant 3D is doing, it's modifying that feature. See, so if I'm going up and down with this, and let's say if I go back to this boss extrude, it is now 2.94 and so on. So that's because I just manipulated that arrow, right? That instant 3D arrow. So sometimes that's a convenient way to change a face quickly without having to go back to the original feature. Right, just click on it, and you can just drag it up and down, or you can even just drag the, you know, that feature tree, right? That feature thing. So let's say 3.5. I hit rebuild, and it goes up there. And the cylinder's following it because I made that sketch on that face. So that's why the cylinder follows that. All right, so let me stop there. And so I have the 3.5 there. And I still have my two bodies there. But now let's do it a different way. And now I'm going to use the direct editing tool to do this. And it's going to look the same. I'm going to select this face and I'm going to move it, but I'm going to use the move face on this. So I'm going to select move face, and now it's different. Now I have a triad that I can move up and down. So if I just get this Y and move it up, notice that the cylinder's not moving, first of all. It's a little different. And I'm going to move it up 1.5 to go back up to 5 inches. All right, so when I say okay, cylinder stays where it originally was. So what this is doing, see, so what you're doing is you're editing the geometry directly without having to affect the original features. And like I said, so what you're doing is you're editing the the geometry on your model without affecting the original features. And that's the big difference between instant 3D, which does affect the original features, or direct editing, which does not. So now this is back to a 5x5 cube, and you're saying, okay, well, what about the cylinder? The cylinder should be up above here. So that's now because it is a separate body, it didn't follow that, the moving up of that piece, because that's a separate operation. And because this got edited after the fact, it is no longer tied in with this, with that cylinder sketch and that cylinder, extruded from that face. This got edited afterwards. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to not do a move face, but I'm going to do a move body. So that's next to next to move face, and that's move copy bodies. And I may have added a few of these in here too. The scale and flex and combine and split may not be in your direct editing tool. So it should look like this. So those are just probably the most useful ones. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the move bodies, or move copy bodies. And this also gets a triad. And it may not show up as a triad initially. Remember that there are two parts, kind of like two sides to this coin here, to this move copy bodies. This by default, it comes in at this sort of like a kind of like very similar to assemblies, and assemblies in that you can do constraints, you could do coincident. So you could do it that way. You can move a body so that it, let's say, one face constrains to another face. Or if you just click on this bottom button here, translate rotate, you kind of do it the old-fashioned way, which is just a straight move or rotate or what have you. Here I'm just going to do it the old-fashioned way. I'm going to just move this up 1.5, and I'll just type in 1.5 here and put 0 there. So now we're kind of like back to where we were here. So that involved a move face, and moved up 1.5, and a move body, move copy bodies to 1.5. Okay, so they're in the same location where they originally, were meant to be, and you can still do a combine. And yes, okay, so I'm also going to do it. I'm going to delete this combine. All right, let me know if there's any questions so far. Let me open up the chat here. Make sure no one's asking questions while I'm talking. There we go. Now I can see everybody's questions. Okay. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this cylinder body again. So here's the cylinder. I'm going to do another move copy bodies. I'm just going to move it straight down. Let's see, how about 1/2 inch or 3/4 of an inch? So I just move this 3/4 of an inch downward. And I'm also going to, well, first of all, I'm going to name this. So this is move -0.75. That way I know what this, what this does. So this is cylinder up 1.5. That way I know exactly what that does. And what I'm going to also do is I'm also going to rotate. And then I'll rotate that to 70. So that's the cool thing you can do with these move copy bodies. So this is something you couldn't do with just an instant 3D, obviously, right? So now we have a lot more latitude in what we can do. You know, we can rotate things. So not only move, but also rotate. You know, you can also copy them, you know, do a linear pattern or a circular pattern. And then, you know, we can do, you know, a combine subtract, which we'll do right now. Also, I do want to make a note about something that comes up with bodies that are intersecting, but they don't necessarily share a face, or I'm sorry, well, an edge, either a face or an edge. And you can tell right away, because if you have your edges turned on, which normally you do, it's this top button up here, right? So shared, I'm sorry, shaded with edges. So if that's on, you can see all the edges. But notice what we don't see edge here. If I zoom in here, I can see this edge, but there's no edge here. And that's because they don't, there's no shared edge at that, you know, at that junction here, at this intersection. I have one body, and I'm going to hit my select filter solid bodies here. That way it selects the whole body. So if I select this body, you know, the body runs through this cube all the way through. If I select this, this also runs all the way through the cylinder. So they don't share a common edge at this point. That's why you don't see a black line going through here. And that's also why you wouldn't be able to fillet this with this, you know, this face with this face, because there is no shared edge there. So this is kind of a quick clue as to, you know, do these two faces share an edge? And since there's no black line there, no, they don't. They don't share an edge at that point. All right, so that's just kind of a quick tip there to identify something like this. All right, so now what I'm gonna do is excavate the cylinder from the cube. So again, I'm gonna use the combine. So I'm playing with the, you know, with the bodies here, manipulating those. And I'm gonna hit combine, but this time I'm gonna click on subtract. So with subtract, you know, just like any kind of larger number, right? You need something to subtract from. So see how this blue field is empty? It's expecting a selection of the main body. Like what are you going to subtract from? In this case, it's going to be the cube. And so I click once, and when you click the first time, if you already have it selected in here, it'll disappear from this list. And I'll do that again. So it was in this list because I had them both selected. So what I'm going to do is select it again, or deselect it, and it comes off of this list. And what you want to do is put it in this selection up here. So now it turns green. It's color-coded green so that it says, okay, this is the main body. And you can also show a preview, see what it's going to look like. And there it is. I'll hide the preview. I'll say okay. And there we go. So that piece got excavated from that other piece. And, you know, all stuff you can do, you know, with sketches and, you know, planning and stuff like that. But sometimes, you know, where you're in the design phase and you can, you know, all you want to do is just say, okay, I'm going to get this other body and just delete it from, you know, the initial body. And sometimes you may also want to pattern something. You know, maybe you want to pattern this piece, whatever, circular, maybe it's a coin holder or something, right? And this is sized to a quarter, or maybe you want to size another one to a nickel or a penny and all this and so forth. So this might be a faster way to work. And by that, I mean, you know, maybe this is the quarters. All right, so I'm going to turn the combine over here. I'm going to move this over. So it's another move. So I'm going to move this over here. I say okay. And I'm also going to scale this down. Maybe I never have this many quarters in this holder, so I'm going to scale it. So this body is going to be scaled about its centroid, which is the center, kind of the center of mass here. And I'm not going to uniform scale this. I want to do 0.5. And unfortunately, it doesn't give you a preview. So there we go. So now I just scaled it in the Y, I'm sorry, in the X direction. Because I look down at my triad over here, and that was the X direction. So I scaled this piece in just one direction here. So now I'm going to do another move copy bodies. I'm going to do this body here. I'm going to move it over. And this time I am going to use the copy feature. And I'm also going to multiply it. So I'm going to do 2 copies. All right, so let's say this is the Nichols version. So I'm going to do scale again. And this one can be just a uniform. Let's say I'm going to do uniform scaling. And let's say a nickel is 0.8 factor of the quarter. So that goes down, actually probably less, probably 0.9 or something. And I'm not sure what it is for sure, but let's just say it's 0.9. And maybe this is the dimes slot here. So I'm going to do a scale just on that one. And that one I'll do 0.8. I'll just select that body so that it shows up in here. And then that'll be the dimes slot here. All right, so all this time I'm just working with bodies, I'm just kind of just playing around with them and just seeing how, all this can work. Let's say in this case, I have enough room for another slot side by side, something I may have not have thought of, in the sketch or in the plane and all that. But maybe I just want to try that. So I'm going to do a move copy bodies. I turn off copy at this point. Move this over here. Say okay, and then do another move copy bodies with this one. This time I will copy it. And move it over here. And now I have my second dimes holder there. All right, so now with all those in place, now it's time to do the combine. So altogether, I have what, 5 bodies? I'm going to do the combine. You have to select at least more than one to combine. So there's the cube. The cube was already pre-selected there. I'm going to do a subtract. And there we go. So there's the dime slot, 2 dime slots, a nickel slot, and then a quarter slot. All right, so all that done with just the, a manipulation of the bodies. You can just quickly get to a fast design, so that you show, your boss and saying, okay, this is the design, and you can even take it further. Let's say you want to make the most use of this space here, and saying, okay, well, these areas here are pretty big, so I say, okay, I can take this face and move it over here. So now we can still use the direct editing. You don't have to go to the original body, resize it, or do the scale and all that stuff. I can just grab this face and move it over. And there is no, right now, if I, even though Instant 3D is on, notice that when I click this, there's no arrow here. And that's because it's not tied into a feature. There was no sketch that made this, and there was no, cut extrude that made this. So that's why there is no arrow that shows up here. So that's kind of a clue also that you did this with, all with move copy bodies and all that stuff. So I'm going to go back to direct editing. I'm going to go to move face. I'm going to go back to move face. I can grab this face and directly move that whatever distance I need to. Now, notice that all the shared edges move along with that face. So even though you only selected that one face, what it's doing is it's everything that is, kind of knit and tied to that, to the edge of that face also goes along with it. So when I let go here, when I say okay, See how this face also got bigger and this one got reduced basically. So this moved over as well. So now I had this, you know, this increase in size for that. So I'm going to do the same thing here. Move face, and I'll move this over. And that's about it there. So it's pretty cool there. You can measure things, you know, maybe you want to get an exact size. You can use like offset, all kinds of stuff with this. Let's see, I think if I go back to this move face, we can rotate. You can just do a specific offset size here, you know, 0.1. I'm going to undo that. So I want to go back to my original size. Okay. All right, so I'm also going to move these two. So I'll move these two over. So same thing, move face. I'm going to select translate those two faces, and I'll move those over there. So I just made those bigger. So now I just increase the size, you know, all these, so it holds more, you know, more coins. All right, so let's say your boss says, okay, well, you know, I don't want these to sit straight up and down. I want these to have this, you know, some kind of an angle, you know, so that it's better to access. You know, you can hold your finger in between them, and you can just, you know, just pull them out a lot easier if they were angled. So they want let's say a 10-degree angle from this edge. So, and with that, you know, that's another simple thing you can do. Also with move face. So instead of having to go back and figure out some complex cut, that would actually be, it might be a complex revolve, right? Because it's not going to be a straightforward cut, because this will have to have some kind of weird draft angle. It might not even be possible with just cut. Probably have to revolve it. But you just do a quick rotate. All right, so I'm going to say, let's say I think it was 10 degrees, right? We wanted 10 degrees. And let's say we don't want to, right now it's rotating about the center of this face. It just kind of picks a center. But let's say I wanted to rotate around this edge, or about that edge. So there is an axis reference area here that you can pick. So if you pick that edge, it now, you know, defaults to that edge, and it rotates from that. So it sees that as an axis, and it rotates 10 degrees from this axis. So that face is now rotated, and say okay. And now we have a 10-degree angle just on one side. So you can do the same thing with this one. That's the face. I click on the axis. There we go. So 10 degrees. And so this one, we're going to do two faces. So that one and that one. Same axis, you just pick one of the edges. Let's go 10 degrees. And there we go. So if I pull a section off of that, there we go. So now just one of those faces has that angle. So the coins will face in this direction, and of the two sides, you know, the coins will just go to that one side, because they'll just tend to kind of fall on the angled one, I would think, right? So that's that piece. And then you can go in and add all your, you know, your fillets and any text and all that stuff, whatever it is that you need for that. This might be helpful too for, you know, maybe this same part has, you know, maybe a couple different molds for different countries, you know, different coins there, you know, so you can do this. You can set this up as you know, a configuration. So let's say I'm going to turn off my. So this will kind of get us into a little bit of configurations here. So I'm going to go to configurations, and so this is the default. I'm going to add a configuration. So I'll just call this US coins. So I'm going to add another configuration. So let's say Canadian. And I'm not sure what coinage diameters and stuff they use, but let's just say, for the sake of argument here, that they have something that's smaller than a dime, let's say. Okay, so let's make this slightly smaller so that they have room for the dimes there. So in this case, move face, but this time I'm not going to move this face up or down. What I'm going to do is offset it. And by offsetting, it's just that what it does is it offsets that face whatever distance you need. You can see it offset. So it's kind of like surface offset in a way, but the big difference is going to be that it takes the edges with it. So it takes this, the edge that it shares with this face. It's going to move it over. Same thing on this side, same thing on this side. And those have, semicircle, cylindrical faces. It'll take those edges with it as well. So let's move it 0.12, not so much, right? So it just shrank a little bit. I'll call it Canadian. Let's just call it Canadian dime, right? So that'll be that feature. All right, and let's say they have something that's, I don't know, something bigger than a quarter. So I'm going to move face. Offset is still on. This time I'm going to flip the direction because maybe they're quarter, maybe it's a $half, whatever it might be. I'll call that 1.15. And it takes, all the edges with it. You don't have to do any other, trims or anything like that. It just happens, right? And so I'll call this a Canadian $half. So I'll just do those two. And I'm going to just put those in a folder. Just gonna leave it like that, Canadian currency there. So now when I go back to US, you see it goes back to the same, those previous dimensions that I had. And when I click on Canadian coins, I get an increase or decrease on one, increase on the other one. And with those configurations, you can do the same thing on text possibly. Maybe it's got something in, US text or whatever that might be, embossed in here in the mold, and then something in Canadian French here, that would take the place of the other one, of the other text in that same mold. So that way, all the other stuff that goes with it, let's say all the clips and the the shell and all the bosses and all the other engineering that went into it, they don't have to be duplicated. They just, it's created once. And the minor changes that go from country to country are implemented on just a small configuration, right? So if anything else changes, you don't have to worry about all that stuff. So let's say I'm gonna add a draft angle here. So I'm gonna go draft angle. So I'm gonna add a draft to this. So let's see, this is a neutral plane. Right, this is going to stay fixed. The faces to draft are going to be all of this stuff. The draft angle is, let's say 5 degrees. Let's say okay. So there's my draft angle for this mold. I'll add some fillets. There's my selection helper for the other two. I'll say okay. I'll add a fillet there. And that one will be like just very small. There's my selection helper for the fillets. There we go. Maybe I want one on top here. 0.15 for that one. And there we go. So there's the coin holder. Maybe one final shell. Let's do that. And there's my part. Oh, notice I kind of made not a mistake, but this wasn't in the default configuration. So everything all those fillets, the draft angle, all that stuff was only applied to Canadian coins. I'm going to put it on default. So let's see, all of this stuff, the draft, all of this stuff. Remember the configuration manager or configure feature, which is kind of like the spreadsheet looking thing here. So these on the columns, those are all of the features that I applied after the Canadian coins. So because they were only applied to the Canadian ones, they're not suppressed for the Canadian feature. But I want them to be around for all of the rest of them as well. So I'm going to turn off the suppression for all of these. So I just basically want it to be on for everything. So I say, okay. So now when I go to either default or US, I still have my draft angle, my fillets, my shell, all of that stuff's in there. So the only thing that changes are the Canadian size coins here. Put a little Canadian flag on there if you want. So any questions so far? Gotta be some questions, right? Stop recording here.